Welcome to The Human Code, the podcast where technology meets humanity, and the future is shaped by the leaders and innovators of today. I'm your host, Don Finley, inviting you on a journey through the fascinating world of tech, leadership, and personal growth. Here, we delve into the stories of visionary minds who are not only driving technological advancement, but also embodying the personal journeys and insights that inspire us all. Each episode, we explore the intersections where human ingenuity meets the cutting edge of technology, unpacking the experiences, challenges, and triumphs that define our era. So, whether you're a tech enthusiast, an inspiring entrepreneur, or simply curious about the human narratives behind the digital revolution, you're in the right place. Welcome to The Human Code. I'm here with TJ Kennedy, a firefighter turned tech CEO. Is the best way that I can introduce this man. He's on a number of boards. He's been an entrepreneur and has some really great things to share with us about what we can do with AI and public services. TJ, thank you so much for being with me today. Really appreciate everything you're doing and would love to hear more about your story about how you got to be a firefighter. And then additionally, what was that transition like to being a CEO and the applicable skills that you brought along with you?
That's a great question, Don, and thanks for having me on today. I think growing up, I grew up in the Poconos of Pennsylvania, rural fire department and EMS when I was in high school, and I ended up going out to Utah, the University of Utah, to go to college. And I skied so much my freshman year, I lost my scholarship, so I had to work my way through college after that. And I ended up becoming a Park City firefighter and eventually paramedic. And I was working my way through college that way. Also ended up becoming my senior year in college, a state trooper. Ended up doing those jobs along with being a lifeflight paramedic for a little over 10 years. And I ended up having my hands in all of public safety, police, fire, and emergency medical services. And it was a great way to be exposed to public service. And lucky enough that Salt Lake was awarded the Winter Olympics of 2002 back in around 1996. And I was involved with all the mountain venues in the Summit Wasatch County area of Park City, and ended up being put in charge of public safety for those Summit Wasatch County venues, Utah Olympic, Park City, Deer Valley, Soldier Hollow, and worked on that for a number of years, and then got recruited after the Salt Lake Games were over to go build out all the technology for the Greek Olympics. So I picked up and moved to Athens, Greece, and built out 30 technology systems for the Hellenic Police and Fire and EMS, as well as Coast Guard. And that kind of created my journey into a Fortune 500 company doing very large, complex technology projects. And did that for about 9 years, and I was recruited by Raytheon to run their public safety business. Did that for a couple of years, and then was recruited by the U.S. government to come back in and build a new nationwide public safety agency to create a nationwide network for first responders called FirstNet. FirstNet stands for the First Responder Network Authority. And long story short, we built the biggest public-private partnership, I believe, that's ever happened, a $100 billion public-private partnership, which was awarded to AT&T. And AT&T then in about 12 months stood up a nationwide public safety broadband network, along with 5 years of additional build out, including deep rural build out that now has over 5.5 million first responder connections and over 28,000 agencies in the United States that are on that network. So really proud of the great work of FirstNet, and went on to help other countries build strategies for public safety broadband networks. I'm still on the board of New Zealand's version called the Public Safety Network today, and ended up helping out a lot of tech companies, and then was recruited by some former FirstNet board members to be a public company CEO and public company board director. Ended up joining a couple of boards, did a couple of years with an enterprise video company, and then a couple of years on the board, and then a year as CEO of a public safety virtual reality company, as well as Less Lethal Tools, and wrapped that up last year. And now I'm just focused on being on a number of boards and the public safety kind of life safety world here, which is really my focus at the end of the day is empowering first responders with life-saving technology.
It's absolutely incredible because the numbers that you're rattling off both are impressive from a business standpoint, but then at the same time, like you're really talking about saving people's lives here and like the impact that you can have on the time that it takes for somebody to receive service. But additionally, I can imagine that you have some great stories about the people that have been impacted by these systems you've been a part of.
One of the cool things about it is, as a first responder, you get to respond typically to one person or a few people that need help, and you might save their life, you might not, but you're always going to have, I think, a positive impact on the outcome for that person's life. And to me, that was one of the most rewarding things I've ever done in my life, is being a part of a team. And that's the cool part about being a lifeline paramedic or being a firefighter and a paramedic. Hey, you work on a team. You're always there with a team to help make somebody's worst day better. And that's incredible. And the only thing I think that's better than that is if you could help thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of first responders make and just save more lives and be empowered to do their job in a more effective and efficient way. And that's what I get to do now, is we get to help even millions of first responders make a difference, and just super proud of the ability to try to get them the tools that they need. I think one of the things I saw most as a first responder is we're really good at getting by with good enough, but that often means you don't get the best technology. We were always 10 years, 15 years behind the latest technology. And I didn't think that was right. I didn't think it was fair that first responders were using 90-year-old radio technology rather than something a bit more modern than that.
It was always amazing. I was working in the vending industry, and we briefly talked pre-show about like the proliferation of like cell phone connections with your project with AT&T. But at the same time, like we were always like a generation or two ahead of what the first responders were using. And I always found that fascinating, given that literally we were giving out candy bars, right? Like it's candy bar and Coke products. And at the same time, first responders were the ones that were keeping the older networks in play. So I love that you're working to bring better technology into that space. What are you most excited about being implemented today?
I think the future of AI is really going to change public safety for the better as well. If you think about it, now that first responders in the US and other countries are now trying to catch up as well, they have access to 5G and robust, ubiquitous 5G that covers more of the country than any other network. Right now, the First Responder Network Authority with the FirstNet network, based on the background of AT&T, has the broadest coverage by hundreds of thousands of square miles more than anybody else in the US. And they have priority preemption encryption all the time built in. In the old days, we used to have to do a number like star 272 to be able to get access to basic priority services. And some networks still do that today. It's crazy. It's very archaic. And instead with FirstNet, it's like you have a device and you just look in the upper left-hand corner, it says FirstNet, and magically you always have priority preemption. And what that means is if you're running applications on your devices, and not just phones, it could be in-vehicle computing, it could be tablets, it could be all sorts of IoT devices that firefighters might wear, or fire equipment and apparatus, your police and EMS as well. You always have this HOV lane in the sky on the network where you're actually on a network that feels like it's completely unthrottled. You have unlimited bandwidth for what you're trying to do. And that means that we can do the really cool things, and not just edge computing, which is important, and I think a big part of the future, but also you can run massive applications that really use a lot of data. And during an emergency, you might have 100 or 200 responders in a small area. My local police department here had an officer-involved shooting last night after a road rage incident on the local highway. And we end up with 20 or 30 officers in a very small area in a town that's not a massive metropolitan area. And that's going to overload the network in a typical sense. But in a FirstNet sense, it acts like it's completely empty because of priority preemption. They're able to keep the commercial traffic out of the way so that all the communication needs of that local agency. So if you're flying drones and helicopters with live video downlink, and you have many different command and control applications running, all of that is available to you. And so instead of being 10 years behind technology, we can actually be first. And so if we look at that, I'm super excited about the situational awareness capabilities brought by drones, by drone swarms, by all sorts of new modern video technology and things that just would not have been even imaginable before a FirstNet network existed.
It's incredible. We were talking about the existence of 4G as being one of the things that proliferated, like Instagram, TikTok, and that network as being necessity for those devices and applications to go. And it's amazing to hear how stuff that we don't hear in the commercial space, but that this FirstNet system will actually enable more effective responses from our public services. That's amazing. What is another use case of AI that you see as being like impactful for that firefighter, for that police force?
I'll give you two examples that I think are unique. One in the drone space is having the ability to have swarms, multiple drones being flown by one firefighter or one police officer. Today, that's a very costly, expensive thing if you have to have one person trained fully to be able to fly one drone. But what if you could fly 100 drones with one individual. The second thing is, I think, flying drones by voice. So one of the things that large language models gives you the ability to do is you get to speak and have that translated into commands that then is digested by that drone or that drone swarm, where it could be like, hey, look over these rooftops in downtown for a shooter with a rifle, because that's the call that we just received. And rather than flying manually to go look at that, those drones can go find that shooter with a rifle on a rooftop because of object recognition and knowing the geography. And because of GIS, you have the ability to geo-fence that area for where it needs to be. And in 30 seconds, you might find that shooter, something that would have taken 10 minutes, 20 minutes before it could have a catastrophic outcome. So that's one really unique example. Same thing for a school shooting. Let's say where typically 70% of the shooters are outside the school. And if you respond with police officers, you're just using as much ground as you can cover. But what if you could send 10 drones that go find the shooter very quickly? In a less severe kind of sense, think of there is currently some AI being developed for officers to be able to find information more quickly for a police officer just on regular duty. And so think of a Siri for police where they can look up traffic codes. They could look up policies and procedures on how to deal with a particular incident or officer involved shooting, like I talked about earlier. And having that just on the lapel and a microphone and a speaker of an officer where they could be like, hey, look this up, go find this. What's our policy and procedure? Help me find the nearest homeless shelter because I need to drop somebody off that we're giving a ride to. Things that today would require somebody to Google it or look it up and takes time. And one of the things is officers are driving a lot, but it's pretty hard to use some of this technology if you're driving without kind of that voice and AI, large language models built in that can help you find things and track them down. So that's another one. A third one is think of automatic license plate readers. If you've ever seen a patrol car with these little cameras on the back, what they're looking at is they're mostly reading license plates and often finding cars that are stolen or people that are wanted. But what about using that data to find a missing child or to find a missing person? We have silver alerts, which is when sometimes you have Alzheimer's patients that walk away from their home or walk away from a nursing home. And what if we could use the cameras that are already up in the town to be able to locate that person more quickly? These are things that I think AI is going to have a big impact on public safety.
I think that's fantastic to hear that we can have so much of an influence on really just the safety and the help that we can give to people. What kind of controls do you see necessary for essentially protecting the private citizens' rights or any privacy, as well as just basically like we're looking at this is the nuclear energy of it. What's your take on the nuclear bomb?
Yeah, I think we have an obligation to have ethics and advisory boards. I think we have an obligation to have police oversight boards. I think that it's upon us regardless of AI. I think AI is a piece of that. I think there's broader elements. I also think we need to start with the easier stuff. And I'll give you an example. I was speaking with a police chief in New Jersey recently, and he has a drone program today, a traditional drone program where they went out and just bought 2 drones and they fly them with 1 police officer each, typical kind of startup program. And I said to him, what if you had the ability to have AI and to be able to fly multiple drones at once and to be able to do it from a police operations center rather than the field and fly beyond visual line of sight? What would you want to do with it? And what about privacy and other things? And he had the right answer. And the right answer was the number one issue for police chiefs today is recruitment and retention. We don't have enough police officers. We don't have enough to backfill the officers that are retiring. The last couple of years have been very difficult on law enforcement recruiting and retention. And I need them to do the mundane, boring things that police officers end up spending a lot of time on. So one of the examples he gave was every morning he has to send physical police officers to every school crossing guard location in his jurisdiction because school crossing guards sometimes just don't show up. And that creates a hazard and a problem for kids. It happens every school day, year round in these communities. And he said, we've just had too many instances where they just don't show up and kids can get hit by cars and there's a problem. And so every day he has officers driving at different times of the day because there's different elementary school and other hours. And he goes, it's taking officers off the street. It's also not the most fun thing to go do. He goes, what if we could have drones that are scheduled every morning at 7:15 and 7:45 and 2:12 and 2:48 to go check all these and look to make sure the crossing guard showed up. And if they did, we can validate that we just saved a couple hours of time across the city where all of those crossing guard validations are in place. And that's a very mundane thing, but you've just given us hours back to the day. Another one they do in their particular town in New Jersey gets flooded a lot when it rains is what if we could fly and the two things they have to check every time it rains is they have to go check all the major grades near the low-lying areas of town for debris. And they literally look to see other sticks and other debris that are on there. And it's something you would think Public Works would do, but they don't have a big enough Public Works department. In the rain and the horrible weather, the police officers go and look at hundreds and hundreds of grades every time out in the rain. Could we fly those with a drone that automatically knows with GIS where every grade is, and then automatically has the object video capability to see if it's covered or not with debris? And if it is, we can send somebody out to clear it. But now we're looking at 2 or 3 drains rather than a couple of hundred. The other thing they do is every 15 minutes during a rainstorm, they drive to the local river and there's painted lines of how high is the river flow against the river where it might overflow into town and floods hundreds of homes. He said, what if we could send a drone every 15 minutes and just go and look at how high the river is? Now we're not sending officers, which is actually dangerous, out next to the river where it might be flooding to go look at how high it is every 15 minutes. So these are just examples where we may not think about the impact that technology can have on staffing and on morale. Nobody wants to do those particular things over and over again versus saving somebody's life or doing something that might be more critical, but they need to be done. And so I think those are cool things where they're mundane, not a whole lot of, I think, chance for abuse or bad use of video or what have you. And also they can be pre-programmed. It's something that doesn't even require a pilot to operate manually what's going on. So I think those are good examples where almost every city in America could do things like that.
I think that's a really beautiful example of like how we can apply AI to make both the human responsibility handle the things that they actually need to be handling versus, like you're saying, the mundane tasks. And as well, doing it in a responsible way that doesn't impact really too much. So that's, I think, a really great path. Where do you see AI having the largest impact on your own personal life?
Boy, that's a loaded question. I think at the end of the day, I think, once again, replacing mundane tasks. I believe that AI is going to take out some of the administrivia that we all deal with every day. And whether that's helping to write correspondence, whether that's helping to read correspondence. I'm a data hungry person. I love to read and digest all this information. And I'm starting to use different tools to, how can you read through all this information? I just had a friend of mine publish a new book that's in the revenue space. It's huge, 900 pages long. And one of my friends who's in the AI space with me just said, hey, I'm happy to pay you the price for this book because your knowledge is invaluable. And it's an expensive book. It's $90. But he said, I'd really rather buy a PDF and have it digested and all the key points shared with me and being able to search and find things in it. And that's what happens in 2024 that wouldn't have happened in 2021. Is the PDF of that book might be more valuable than actually reading the book or the hard copy of the book, because what we're going to do with it.
I really can't tell you the amount of times that I've taken a PDF and then just started asking questions after putting it into an LLM, because it is now the search and retrieval is much more better. The understanding, the comprehension is there, right? It's still leaving a little bit to be desired, fails on some places, but at the same time, absolutely amazing.
I mean, just think, I'm a kind of person that my whole life has used a notebook like this to take notes, right? But what if we started taking all of our notes in Remarkable or some other digital format of tool, but an LLM could take all of TJ's notes for the last 30 years in public safety and technology, and I could find, hey, what was that meeting in Greece 20 years ago with the Hellenic police chief where we talked about this, right? And having that data on my fingertips. I have a notebook with it, right? But am I going to be able to go find it and go look on what page is it? I've got some dates on the front of the book, but right. And then what if I want to write a book about all those amazing experiences in public safety and technology? Would it be better to search for the 5 years of working on FirstNet, for instance, and just all the cool information we digested and turned into a great strategy? But what about that strategy meeting we had where we figured out the business model for $100 billion public-private partnership? Boy, that'd be great to find those notes. I know I have them. I don't know where they are right now, but they're on our shelf somewhere. But I think those are the kinds of things that are going to empower TJ to write a book a whole lot faster than I could without it.
It's funny, is like some of those use cases that you're talking about, I've implemented some of them. Like all my notes are in markup format, and I have an OpenAI connection that parses through it to look for similarities between notes, right? What are something that I may cross-reference at a future date? Previously, you needed to tag everything. You needed to give it structure. Whereas sometimes journaling or note taking isn't a very structured process, but you know that you want to retain that information. And so we now have an LLM that can go about and create that connections for us.
Yeah, you're hitting on a key thing. I think unstructured data has always been the death of finding good information, right? And really, until LLMs have gotten to be as prolific as they are today, I think unstructured data was a black hole. And I think we have a chance to not only retrieve what we do now, maybe even the past, if we could put the last 20 years of unstructured data into what we have. I think for those of us who are mid-career or later in our career, we have an ability to really leverage all of that great data that we've created or have access to.
Exactly. And then the other side of it is you may have some amazing notes as well. And we're collaborating on something. For me to have access to that, I may not have known about the Helsinki connection that you had, but those notes could bubble up and actually pop into our frame of reference.
Oops.
Looking at what businesses are doing for the next 5 years, what do you think are the importance of having an AI strategy? What are the things that you're looking out for as you're having like board level discussions around like where you're directing the companies that you're involved with?
Yeah, I think the key for any board directors today is you have to have an AI strategy, right? I think you can't ignore it in the tech world that we're in today. I think everyone has to have one, just like you have to have a cybersecurity strategy. And if we look at what's happening in the public markets, I've been on public company boards with NASDAQ and New York Stock Exchange. You have to have a cyber board focus. You have to have a cyber committee looking at your cyber risks. You have to have people with cyber experience. And I get a lot of calls about that on boards today. And I think the same kind of mentality has to be with AI. You need to have board members that understand AI. And it doesn't mean we're all world experts. I'm not the world's biggest expert on AI, but I'm actively involved and I'm on the boards of companies with AI. And we're using it. And to your point, I think we learn from it every day. And I think that you have to make it an agenda item. How can we be disrupted by AI tomorrow? And what are we doing to leverage it rather than fight it? And I think that's a really important question. Even in just the average SaaS company, how we develop today is very different than how software developers are going to develop tomorrow.
Absolutely. I know we saw the release of Devin a couple days ago, and that was an exciting time to see that we have an AI that could actually fix, I think it was 7% of GitHub issues. From the standpoint of creating an AI strategy, do you see that there's any different paradigms that companies need to be looking at how they're implementing AI versus the way that they looked at technology before?
I think similar to the point I made earlier, if you're looking at LLMs and AI in general, I think you need to look at solving the mundane issues rather than the wildly crazy, more radical kinds of things. And I think just like looking for code bugs and other things that are pretty mundane, but we spend a ton of time on and we spend a lot of time testing and fixing. That's a great example, and separate than the public safety example I used earlier, where it's let's fix all this mundane administrivia kind of things with AI, which allows the big thinking of our human interactions to be more thought of in strategy and focus and direction of where we're going with technology. And I think finding the way to elevate the role of our talent is something we have to think about every day. And I think that we also shouldn't just be scared of AI. I'm not in the believer that it's the apocalypse someday or the RoboCop of technology. I think a lot of that is blown out of proportion. And instead, we just need to get smarter. I'm a huge fan of Andrew Ng and Coursera and people just understanding AI. I think everybody on a board should take the basic understanding AI course from Andrew. It's out there. It's simple. It's easy to access. And I just think we just need to get smarter and understand what it really does and what it doesn't do is also really important. I think there's a misperception for some of the more negative things that really aren't as prolific as people think.
I can share that sentiment that it's good to be thinking about how terrible it can be, but also it's going to take a lot of leaps to get to that point. And I think AI alignment comes down to really the challenges that we have in humanity as well with alignment. So they're the same problems, just really blown up into different regards. So having an eye on it, okay, but at the same time, there's so much value that can be created. There's so much freedom that can be enjoyed by taking care of the mundane. We had an implementation where we were working with a services company. They do about 100 invoices a day. They were all handwritten. What we did is we took the handwritten notes, used an AI to process them, and then spit out like more professional looking, saved each one of their texts, 20, 30 minutes a day in what they were doing, gave the customer a better experience, but also allowed the techs to focus on what the relationship was with the customer instead of worrying about the mundane. So I think you're on the right path around focus on the mundane. Another area, and I'm curious your thoughts, when we're designing out implementation for AI, we're looking at creating a process and almost earmarking humans at every point of who's going to be doing this task. And then our AI analysis is, all right, what is the mundane that we can take out of this and treat the AI as if it is that Sally doing this task instead of thinking that it's just a piece of tech that's going to handle it.
No, I think you're right. And I think that we have to be more deliberate about what tasks we have our team doing today and how to automate. It's really simple. Automate the mundane and take out the repetitious thinking. I think back to the easy example of Steve Jobs always wearing the same outfit to work every day. He did that to save on the brain power of what am I going to wear today? What shirt, what clothes, what sneakers? And at the end of the day, just wore the same basic uniform, if you think about it. And coming out of a uniform first responder world where we did wear the same uniform to work every day, it does make your life a lot simpler. And I think we haven't taken that same approach to every job or role that works for us or on our teams. And what is that mundane set of things that happens the same way every day at work that can be automated? And I think that in manufacturing, we got there over the last 10 or 20 years, especially with a lot of robotics replacing the most mundane things, whether it was gluing components together or looking for differentials off of spec or testing and QAing product that was being built. I think on the software front, we're starting to see that really take off as well. I think though, just for business operations, and it doesn't matter what kind of business you run, to your point, it could be a services business. It could be government activities. I would say probably the area that's most to be disrupted today is government, because government is very old fashioned in the way that they operate. I recently had to get a permit in the county that I live in, and I tried to go by the office to get a permit, and they're like, oh no, you have to make an appointment. I'm like, I'm here now, let's just do it. They're like, no, we're backed up. And I said, how long are you backed up for? They're like, about 2 months. I said, I have to wait 2 months to get a permit? No, I'm just going to write a check and drop off my paperwork. And paperwork's done. It was 3 pages of paperwork. And they're like, you have to make an appointment to come in. And you can go online and do that. Or I guess I can make one for you now. And she was nice enough and made me an appointment. But it was like for March for something I went in January on. And then I said, how long will it take after I actually do that? Well, probably 2 weeks and then you'll get it. That's a great example where 100% of that should be automated. And there probably shouldn't be humans doing all but the most specific tasks that are unique to that. And that was probably a 4-minute task. 4 minutes when I looked at it.
I mean, that's a perfect example of the things that should be automated. The other question that I have for you though, is that there's somebody who takes their time that's backed up for 2 months, right? And then takes 2 more weeks to respond. What do you see that person doing after the fact, right?
I think the reason why, if I went to her boss and said, why is this person backed up 2 months and complained, which I thought about, but I didn't think it would have an impact, quite frankly.
Yeah.
I think they would have said, we just don't have enough stock. We don't have enough people and they have too many things to do. That answers your question. They do have too many things to do and they don't have enough people. So if you were to take 80 or 90% of that role and automate it, you would then have 80 or 90% of that person's role to do the other things that they're too busy doing that this isn't getting done. And so there's enough human work. And this was a law enforcement agency, quite frankly, for them to do where it wouldn't be that hard to reapply their work. Another great example, I think, for this is we're starting to see 911 centers or emergency operations centers that take calls from the public worldwide. It's 111 and 000 in other countries. We think of it as 911. That are becoming much more automated. There's a lot more AI being utilized to route a 911 call and to share video and text and data and automatic repositories of information that can share medical information or pictures of an incident at a scene. And in the old days, we had 2 roles in a dispatch center. One was a call taker who answered the landline phone and wrote down everything and asked all the questions that now we already all know through your smartphone. Your smartphone can give me more data than you could ever tell me in 5 minutes of talking to a call taker. Then that call taker would type it all into a computer-aided dispatch system that would then send it to a radio dispatcher who would have to read all that information and then push buttons on a console to tell somebody over a 90-year-old radio system to go respond to a scene. The community I live in now has what's called live 911, where literally you could have somebody calling in with a suspicious person that is trying to break into a home. And that live call could not only be bypassed by the call taker and bypassed by the dispatcher, it could be sent to the closest officer who's 3 blocks away. And we'll know that through the automatic vehicle location on the person and on the police car, and be able to have them talk to the individual who's saying, hey, I'm following a person in a red shirt and blue jeans who's trying to break into my house. And here's where they're at. And tell me where you're coming from. And boom, hits the person in 10 seconds and the whole call is over. And so between AI and automation, we're now taking roles that were very mundane and very hard to fill. The average 911 dispatcher lasts about 6 months in that role. It's a difficult role. It's high stress. It's mundane. You're dealing with life crises where you can't fix the problem. Somebody else has to fix the problem. Yeah. It's a really tough job. What if we could automate a lot of the parts of that information sharing so that those individuals could be trained as public safety operations center leaders that could look at all the data, make sure it's all getting to the right places, and add value add in fixing and solving problems and making decisions, rather than doing process automation or data entry. And I know their job is much more than that, but there's a lot of data entry and process that's being done in that. And so there's so much work that would make the lives of saving people better that is not data entry.
Absolutely. So the one thing that struck in there is basically, even if you remove 20% of a person's job, like that still frees them up because there's more work that's coming in. We've done a lot of projects where the efficiency gain comes out and says you can cut half of your labor force kind of thing. The funniest part about that is, even though it goes in the financials, I've never had one customer cut a job because of what we're doing, because of that exact reason. There's always more work to be done. There's always improvements that you can be making. The roles shift. And I think that you were saying this as well, is as that person's mundane tasks go away, they become more of an architect in their processing and their automation. And so one of the skills that we've identified as being important is that you need to be developing managerial skills in even your baseline employees, because now they're working with an AI and to handle the mundane tasks and get that feedback and going back and forth. What other skills do you see as being necessary for your employees and the staff?
I think where you're hitting on kind of the magic that's in this change, and it's this higher thinking that comes into it, right? And so we need to train our teams to be able to upskill their ability. And it doesn't have to be college training. It doesn't have to be a master's degree. It has to be live on the job training that takes somebody who's making $20 an hour and doing a difficult data entry, mundane kind of job to be a $30, $40, $50 an hour thinker, an employee that's going to add a ton of value to the business. And it's also something that can scale. So one of the things that I think AI and this role changes, we're going to scale businesses fast. And scaling doesn't always just have to be to do more, but it could be to do it more efficiently so we can accomplish more and cover a greater area. I think we still have massive pressures on unemployment because it's so low in America to have the right skills and the right talent that we need to have, that I think we need to really look at what are the right ways to train and upskill teams to do these higher level roles that are now empowered by AI. And the great news is they're going to be higher paying. They're going to be higher value. They're going to be more engaging. And nobody would really be against that. I think it's such a great chance to upskill our people so that we can scale businesses and improve the way services are delivered.
I'm really curious about your take on job satisfaction today, right? Most people are miserable in their jobs. And it's just a fact, right? I think the number comes in somewhere between 60 and 75% of people who are not satisfied in their employment. Given that there's going to be so much change that comes about with the inclusion of AI, and depending on how fast that comes into the workforce, what do you see as the opportunities to improve our daily existence when it comes to our own employment and satisfaction?
I think we need to encourage people to do a lot of what I think you and I both have done individually, which is build the roles you want to have rather than just go apply for a job. Yeah. And you need to ask to do the work that you want to do. Ironically, if there's something you're really good at and you're really passionate about and you have skills, if you go and talk to businesses that need your capabilities, the likelihood that you're going to work yourself into a job, I mean, we used to call this like networking for a new job. I don't think that was the right way to describe it. It's actually knowing where you can add value and then going and working with those people where you can add value and turning it into what people refer to as a job. I don't know if I would call it a job rather than a passion. But it's not just follow your passion. It's actually using your skills to add value. And people will hire people that will add value to a company, a corporation, an organization. And it's not always the job that's posted on Indeed, right? I'm just not a huge fan. That's the way in most industries to find that next role for anybody at the lowest levels coming out of college. I get asked a lot, what would you tell your 22-year-old self? And it's go do the things you want to do and go work with the people you want to work with. I had a gentleman yesterday, funny story. I just came out of getting my haircut and he walked up to me, and I have a fun pickup truck that is super fun and most guys would dig it, right? And I just like it. And he came up to me and he said, I want to work for you. And I said, why do you want to work for me? He says, I want a truck like that. And when I was walking down the street and he was dead
I
serious.
love that. Yeah.
And I said, I love your attitude. I said, tell me more about you. What are you like? What are your capabilities? What are your skill sets? And whether you work for me or work for somebody I know, the fact that he was willing to walk up and be that bold, I'm willing to be your apprentice. I'm willing to do whatever you're doing right. I want to be a part of that. And I thought that was like the right attitude to your point of like, how do people find that job? If you see people doing fun things that you like, go ask them like, how do I do what you do? And I want to be a part of that.
I love it. I think some things to highlight here is a connection to passion, right? As far as at least understanding what it is, the value that you really want to be contributing. And I think that's the key differentiation of today. We have jobs that have a lot of mundane tasks to them, and you accept that with it. But we're getting into a point of freelancers are accelerating in the economy as far as the number and the percentage of the workforce, which means you're basically choosing the role that you want to play. The digital creator type of universe and being able to put out there all your work to an audience rather quickly has continued to accelerate. I think Gen Z is really leading the charge on differentiating between that. But then also that human connection of being able to say, look, I see that this person has charted a path that I would like to take, and having that, like, so many references are just poorly worded in this moment, but at the same time, seeing those people and saying, you know what, I want to learn from you, and creating that human connection as well. There's only so much that we can learn from a screen or from it. And I think the importance of getting to that human connection can be really significant.
I think that human connection with the willingness to fail, right? The willingness to take a risk. It doesn't have to be a massive risk, but I think to get what you really want out of life, you have to take calculated risks, and you have to take risks to say, hey, I'm willing to work hard and do something different to become what I want to be, or to be a part of something I want to be a part of. And I think we've lost that a little bit with the way hiring and jobs have been in the last 20, 30 years. And I think that, to your point, I think Gen Z is going to push this change because they want different work-life balance. They want different kind of roles to be a part of. And I think you have to make it fun. I think some people have lost the fun in work, to go to your question about like dissatisfaction. I love what I do. I love every part of what I do. And if I don't love something, I stop doing it. And I think that you have to get better. And I've learned this over time. I used to say yes to everything, which I think is the great thing to do in your 20s. You should say yes to almost everything. But I think as you grow in your career, you need to learn to say no to things that might take away opportunity costs to focus on the things you really enjoy. And so both saying yes, I think when you're younger in your career, to a lot of exciting things that may lead you to different places. Public safety led me to technology. That is not a normal chartered path for most people. Public safety led me to leadership. I have an MBA from Johns Hopkins, and most people, you would think of firefighters, that's the path you're going to take, right? But it leads you to other things and how you get there. And then also, I think as your time becomes more valuable for yourself, you also need to make time to go skiing. You need to make time to go paddleboarding. You need to make time to go out in the outdoors and do the things you want to do. And you may need to change your job or your role to facilitate that, right? And to allow you to live in a place where you get to do those things, and skiing's 20 minutes away or whatever that may happen to be. And you have to make time for the things that you want to focus on.
I think that's an amazing point, is that our identities can get so consumed in the work that we do. And that really isn't the point. And like you're saying, what you were saying about making your work fun reminds me of an Alan Watts quote, which is basically like, I'm paraphrasing, you need to make your work look like play so that nobody can tell a difference between when you're actually working or when you're playing.
Yeah, it's such a good point. And I think I've been able to guide my own career, especially in the last couple of years, to where work and play are definitely intertwined a lot more. And I think vacations and work trips are intertwined a lot more. People say, you work on vacation? And the answer is absolutely, I do. But I'm also vacationing in cool places. And I'm also getting on calls at 6 a.m. from Hawaii if you're on a trip and doing a couple hours of work. And when I come back from a trip like that, I'm not, backed up because I've done work every day while I've been away. But it's in a way that I'm having fun. If work is fun, it's okay. And if you still get to go enjoy the things you want to do and you get to go sailing and you get to go do cool things, it's all a good day. And I think the traditional Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 is not ever as simple as people think it is. I think I work really hard and I probably put in a lot more hours than that, but it's not always on the traditional schedule anymore that maybe it used to be. And that allows you to work on a weekend or allows you to work at night or in the morning or other things. But I recently did something that I wish I would do a lot more of. We had over 50 inches of snow here in a couple of days, and it was a Tuesday, and it was just like the sun came out, it was blue skies, and 50 inches of snow in the last 3 days. And I literally had the powder flu just take over me. And I had to adjust my meetings for the afternoon, and I went skiing for 4 hours in this fresh powder, and it was spectacular. And it's the kind of stuff you did probably more when you were in your 20s. And it's not a bad thing to catch the powder flu on a day when you get a lot of snow and the sun comes out. We just have to do that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I think you're right. Like, we need to really take a look at like the balance that we have between work and life and really making an integration and an understanding that like, hey, the powder flu comes about, you've got to catch it and you got to go out in there, enjoy life and like really bring a little bit of joy to yourself. Because you are taking that flexibility and you are waking up at 6 o'clock in the morning in Hawaii in order to get a couple hours of work in. The other side of that is let's go ski on Tuesdays.
Correct. By the way, there were no lines and it was spectacular.
Oh my God. I'm jealous just a little bit, but I do my own thing. Now, I'm really enjoying talking to you here today. Is there anything that we could do for you? Or is there anything that the audience could share in your passion with?
No, I think the only thing I will throw out there is I think everybody in the technology world should sit back and put a challenge to your team of what can we do to empower public safety to save more lives? And it doesn't matter what your technology is. It could be anything in the AI world. It could be anything in the software world. It could be hardware technology. But I think we build a lot of things for consumers. And what I would just like to say is challenge your team, regardless of technology, to say, what if this was in the hands of a paramedic? What if this was in the hands of a firefighter? What if this was in the hands of a public safety agency? What could they do to serve the citizens of their community better with your technology specifically? And if you don't know the answer, take your technology to your local firehouse and ask it, right? Take your technology over to the police station and maybe bring along some coffee or something and say, hey, we'd like to share our technology and say, how could we possibly make this work, help your job easier? And I think that's pretty cool to think about because the reason why most people get passionate about work is they're passionate about their mission.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons that I've always made my life so easy in public safety and technology is the mission is so valuable and you can have such an impact on thousands, if not millions of people by having better technology for public safety. I think even for tech companies should have the same approach. And I know the head of public safety over at Apple, for instance, and if you think of the Apple Watch and you think of the different things that are built into this now for emergency alerting and fall detection, and Rapid SOS, which is a company I advise, has built the technology that every Android and iOS device has for notifying 911 and being able to share location data. And what I love is Gary posts all the time about all these saves that have happened because somebody happened to be wearing an Apple Watch or using an iOS device and they drove off a cliff and they would have never been able to call 911 because they were unconscious, but that crash detection called 911 and a helicopter went in there and saved them before they ever even regained consciousness, which would have never happened with a single individual driving off a cliff before or falling in a national park. Having satellite connectivity that actually goes to these devices off the grid for emergency SOS. And if you think about that and talk about the most rewarding thing for Apple or other technology companies when they're doing things that are saving their customers' lives because of a capability in the technology. How can that not be good?
That is fantastic. I do love how everything that you've been doing ties back to saving somebody's life or making it a much more better place for people. And so it's really commendable. And thank you for dedicating your life to this work.
I appreciate that, but it's so rewarding. It's hard not to do. It's a rewarding element. And I think of, my days as a firefighter, as a flight paramedic, and, they're the most rewarding days I've ever had, or even as a state trooper when you can help somebody.
Yeah.
And there's not a value you could put on that. It's probably the most fun I've ever had going to work. And I think being able to do that on a broader scale with technology is what makes it exciting.
Fantastic. TJ, again, thank you for being here today. If anybody wants to reach out to you, is there a way for them to get a hold of you?
Yeah, one, I'm on Twitter, TJ Public Safety. Also, you can email me at tj@publicsafety.network, and more than happy to connect with anybody out.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you again. And everybody, thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning into The Human Code, sponsored by Findustries, where we harness AI to elevate your business. By improving operational efficiency and accelerating growth, we turn opportunities into reality. Let Findustries be your guide to AI mastery, making success inevitable. Explore how at findustries.co.